Welcome to Nothing Without Us, stories and discussions about meaningful inclusion. We will talk about accessibility, true inclusion, and disability justice with stories, policy updates, discussions, and related commentary on the value of being accessible and inclusive. We believe life should be accessible for everyone, and everyone should be included in all aspects of life. I am your host, Annette Bourbonnier. I am a 70-ish-year-old woman with short gray hair and eyeglasses. I am sitting in a power wheelchair, and my service dog Kirby could show himself at some point during the podcast. This podcast is captioned. Please press the subscribe button at any time during the podcast if you have not already done so. It will not cost you anything, but it will help us make this podcast grow. You are also welcome to make comments in the chat and to give us feedback about what you do or do not like. We especially appreciate a thumbs up. Today's show is a continuation of the Crip the Vote series, where we engage office holders and candidates, and you're both, in discussion of disability issues. Today I am honored to welcome Senator DiPalma, who is the chair of the Finance Committee in the Rhode Island State Senate and represents Middletown, Little Compton, part of Newport, and Tiverton.
Correct.
And Senator DiPalma has been a champion for people with disabilities in the Senate. So welcome, Senator DiPalma.
And it's good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, great. So persons with disabilities represent between 20 and 25% of the American population, making us the largest minority in the United States. However, discussion about disability is never included in campaigns or other public appearances. So this sub-series of my podcast is geared to having people who hold office or who are running for office talking about questions related to disability and what you might be able to offer in these areas. So you supported the establishment of a commission to develop an Olmsted plan for Rhode Island.
Correct.
This did not make it through.
Correct.
Do you see an opportunity to reintroduce this more successfully?
So the answer is yes, but it's not needed. And I'll tell you why.
Why?
The governor recently, within the last month, I believe it was in the month of August, I forgot the actual date, actually issued an executive order.
Did I record it?
Issued an executive order to create an Olmsted plan.
Okay.
And in fact, the plan, with the exception of having a date for a final plan, pretty much for the most part includes all the components that we had that were part of the legislation to create an Olmsted Plan Commission.
Okay.
So it's we're excited about that.
Yeah, because what I liked especially about the legislation that you proposed was that it required meaningful inclusion
Correct.
of people with disabilities. And I have a lot of concern about the state agencies making that fully inclusive.
Right. I think what I've said to folks as we've talked about this, and I'm typically on, I think it's once a month, the Olmsted Plan or Olmsted Committee meets with Lori Marie Preciata, Bob Marshall, and folks from state agencies as well, amongst, I think Kevin Nerney's on that call, amongst other Disability Rights Rhode Island, or Disability Council, is the holding each other mutually accountable.
Okay.
We need to hold the state accountable to make certain it gets done.
Right.
The state needs to ensure that easier said than done, or we got to hold them to do it. Right. Ensure that, and I learned this many years ago, nothing about us without us. So it's important that all the voices are there. And I believe the governor has every intention of doing that, based on how it's structured. And I'm excited that they listened, they heard, they listened, and now acting with regards to creating this group to create an Olmsted plan.
Good. That's good, because we have a lot of infrastructure problems with the Olmsted Committee. Not with the Olmsted Committee, but with what we need to put together a good Olmsted plan.
Correct.
Transportation in Rhode Island is challenging, almost non-existent in some areas. Housing, adequate health care. So we've got a lot of problems that need to be
Correct.
pulled together on that.
And with regards to, I know this is focused on individuals with disabilities, but Olmsted, I said to folks, I try and learn something every day.
Good.
And Bob Marshall has been a good
He's
mentor.
He's a
with
great
regards
guy,
to,
yes. I ought to have him on, by the way, I should.
Yes, you
Yeah.
should. Bob's been very good with regards to ensuring the legislatures are made aware and also educating. What do I mean by that?
Right.
So in fact, the U.S. Department of Justice recently has filed suit or claim to the state with regards to the inappropriate care, these are my words, of children in child welfare,
Okay.
predominantly because of violating the Olmstead Act.
Okay.
Adolescents, children have been placed in settings for which are not appropriate. And I understand the Olmstead plan, it's the right services in the right setting at the right time, in the least restrictive setting.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think they're going to be watching what happens as part of this Olmstead plan very closely.
I think they will, because we've already had one consent decree related to Olmsted, and that
Correct.
was the one about the sheltered workshops. And it's least restrictive setting, and that people with disabilities have choices.
Correct.
That give people with disabilities agency.
Right.
And that would include parents of children with disabilities.
It's the whole spectrum, to really open that aperture.
Right, yes.
And as you're well aware, I did go to the courthouse and I've been on a couple of calls for the DD consent decree,
Right.
which was supposed to have finished April 9th or April 10th of this year.
Right.
Because that was 10 years.
Right.
Well, it hasn't.
We
Because
haven't.
Rhode Island could not get, I'll just say it, could not get out of our own way with regards to doing this when we should have. And the federal court basically said, no, you're not done yet.
Right.
So that's still ongoing, primarily from the shelter workshop perspective.
Right.
But Olmstead applies to individual with disabilities in a grander context,
Right.
but also with regards to child welfare, people in state care or custody, ensuring they're in the least restrictive setting.
Right.
So we had children stuck in Bradley Hospital.
Right.
And that's not, they should not, they were only there, but for a place, they didn't have any other place to go.
Right. We need
So-
to really make sure we are held accountable.
Correct. The one other piece about the Olmstead plan, the same topic, and we can go on or whatever, I believe it's February of next year.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the draft of the plan is due.
Oh, good.
So there's gonna be a bunch of work moving up towards that, but the executive order lays out some things that have to be done.
Good. Okay, good. Can you share that with me
I
at some
can.
point? Oh,
And I
that'd be
think
great.
at the end of the day, I think you'll see that
Mm.
the Olmstead plan, the executive order that the
Right.
I thank Governor McKee for doing it. The Olmstead plan, Olmstead executive order that the governor issued
Right.
is well informed
Good.
by the legislation we had.
Good.
So-
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And there was
That's really good.
quite a bit of conversation with many folks who remain nameless with regards to where the executive order was going or not going.
Right.
So.
Okay, that's great. Wonderful. On the transportation piece, I did discuss that also with Congressman Amo, because, that's where we could get some federal money, I
Correct.
hope, to
Right.
maybe out of the infrastructure grant or something like that.
And the other piece about that, we've had several meetings and discussion. A little bit's happening as it relates to transportation, but one of the folks has been, you may have talked to him, Chris Bove. I don't know if you know Chris.
I know Chris.
Chris is legally blind,
Chris.
and Chris takes the RIDE program, the RIDE
Right.
program, and I say this very favorably. He's a high flyer in that program.
Right,
Chris used to be my constituent from Middletown.
right, yes.
I'm hoping he comes back to become my constituent again. But Chris had a lot to offer with regards to the challenges
Right.
and the impacts
Right.
individuals with disabilities have with the RIDE program.
Right,
To the point where, I think it was, I forgot who I can't think of, I don't want a person to mention the person's name without getting the right name, but Senator DeMario, and I tried to help Senator DeMario with what she was doing, along with, if it was Rep. Carson on the House side or whatever,
Right.
as it relates to the ADA corridor, the American with
Right.
Disabilities Act corridor, that the RIDE program can only operate within a certain
3/4
distance
of a mile
of the fixed
Ah,
route
yes.
program.
Right.
Well,
Right.
we want people to work, and that's all based on whatever, however we decided,
Right.
however it was created. So we actually created a pilot in Rhode Island at the insistence of, I'll say in this case here, Senator Mario and the General Assembly, money to figure out how to expand the transportation for individuals with disabilities via the ride program beyond, for work,
Right.
beyond the 3/4 of a mile
Right.
distance from a fixed route.
Right. Well, they also addressed it for hours. So, for example, on the weekend, getting a bus that comes through Jamestown to Newport is next to impossible, which means also that ride doesn't operate that way.
Correct.
And for some people, that's necessary for work as well.
Right. So that's why one of the areas,
Yes.
as we look at the Senate President, has been very focused on how do we ensure the RIP, the Rhode Island Public Transportation
Right.
Authority, serves all Rhode Islanders to the greatest extent to
Right.
achieve mobility,
Right.
employment, etc.
Right.
That we need to ensure that RIPTA is
Right.
addressing the needs of all Rhode Islanders, not just able,
Right.
call them, those
Right.
who without disabilities.
Right. Now, I know that they've started this new flex ride
Yep.
in South County. So, I mean, that almost using ride like you would ride sharing, only it's a
Correct.
fixed price.
Right.
So I'm hoping that works out because that would make a big difference.
Correct. And so we have to figure out,
Right,
we need to allow and ensure people can get to where they need to go.
right,
All Rhode Islanders, not just a
Right.
small segment of the population.
yeah, right. Not just Providence, Cranston, Warwick.
Right.
And, right,
Even, I mean, so we had folks on Chris was another one of those who would take the bus to go to URI. At one point they changed it, they had 3 buses he took.
oh, God, yeah,
Normally it would have been a half hour, 35 minutes or whatever,
Oh.
from Middletown to there, 2 hours,
I mean, I know.
2 hours.
I know because for a while I did that.
Mhm.
By bus, because I work sometimes at URI.
Right.
And it's like, oh my gosh,
So transportation,
this big
Call
problem,
it,
right,
yep.
yeah. And we obviously have a problem with housing,
yes,
and corporate healthcare is really diminishing access to healthcare in some significant ways, especially for people with disabilities. And, so there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be addressed.
correct. Right.
So,
Clearly, from the General Assembly perspective, there's been a significant focus, and hopefully the General Assembly, the money that's been put towards housing over the last couple of years with state fiscal recovery funds, money
Right.
from the federal government, but also on the ballot this year is a $120 million bond
good,
for housing. So the majority of it is for new housing, some of it's for addressing homelessness, some for new.
Okay.
So we need to figure, we need housing for everybody. It's a
Right.
critical issue
right,
in Rhode Island.
right. Let's hope new housing also is accessible.
Correct. That's part of
That's,
the.
The Thanksgiving Act, as it's called in some states.
Okay, I'm not familiar with it. Okay.
So that people with disabilities can go visit their friends and family on Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Because it's pretty isolating.
Got it.
When
Good
you
point.
can't get in
Yeah.
houses, yeah. Plus, everybody's gonna get older.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, maybe.
well, hopefully.
Hopefully, yes.
Right, exactly. So, okay. So let's look at another issue because, we've worked on this. The bill that was passed 2 years ago to eliminate income and asset limits
Correct.
for people with disabilities who work.
Right.
And it's not yet been implemented.
Correct.
And what do you see as the problem? It's limited to people under the age of 65,
Right.
so I'm not ever going to benefit from it. But it should
Just don't
be.
get older, that's all.
Well, it's
You
too
can't.
late.
It's too late now. Sorry.
Too late. But it's it should be a good first step toward
Correct.
eliminating what I refer to as the ever-present poverty-enforcing policies that
Correct.
we have.
Correct.
So-
So I'll make some call out Senator Valverde and Representative Spears.
Right.
Bridget Valverde, Tina Spears, were big proponents.
Right.
They spearheaded that effort.
Right.
We got it included into the FY24 budget. The
Right.
Budget just finished in June of this year.
Right.
Now we're into FY25, obviously. So thank them for all the effort they put forward of
Oh, definitely.
making certain we were aware
Right.
and educated on the why it was important.
Right.
Yourself, others, Christina Baptista, others
Oh, yeah.
would come to the table and say, we'll go back to the why in a second. I'm gonna answer your question specifically. I believe they had, the comment period is over. They had about, these are my words, rules and regs about it, about operation of it. It should have been in place by now. It's not. I think we'll see it by the end of the year.
Okay.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, people can say that's good, bad, or otherwise. We are where we are. We need to just ensure we're moving forward and getting it done. And you're right, it's gonna allow people to keep, be eligible, still with income increasing, and assets that they have not included, up to a certain amount. I think it's 10,000 if I recall correctly.
Well, the reality is, if you look at allowing people with disabilities to work, this is not a cost to the state.
Right.
Where, you know, the benefits that are being used were going to be used if we weren't working.
Right.
But if we're working, we're paying taxes.
Paying more
taxes.
taxes.
Buying income, we're buying goods and services, which is an economics driver.
Right.
And so it should be looked at as an investment instead of an expense.
Right. I think that's what the case that Senator Valverde and Senate Representative Spears brought forward. We heard in the Senate Finance Committee, and the House heard it as well.
Right.
And you're right, at the end of the day, it was a barrier for folks. And I met with Christine, and I can't remember the other person now.
There were a couple of young men from OSIL.
Well, this was a woman, I can't think of her name. But we met up, in fact, up in Johnston, I think, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, we talked about a variety of things, and I said, what would be your number one priority thing? And so they, both of them, Christine, I think even mentioned where she was gonna get a promotion.
But couldn't take it, right?
Could have taken it,
Right.
but she would have lost her benefits.
Right.
Because, well, how could she lose her benefits?
Right.
Her income would go up, so she'd lose her benefits. We're going in the wrong direction, right?
Right.
People were gonna get a raise for their work.
Right.
They couldn't get a raise for their work because they're gonna make too much money.
Right.
Now it's the case where you can earn more.
Right.
You get to a certain point, you might have to pay a little bit.
Right.
But it's at the end, and assets that you have are not included in that calculation.
Right.
And it's for, as you indicated as well, and for folks 65 and younger. When they turn 65, I think they'll go back if they were before on the Sherlock plan.
Right.
But they have a means of transfer because expect after 65 you're not working, right?
Oh, really? Oh. You don't know how old I am.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So
I think it's a very positive program, but sometimes people say, why didn't we have it before? I don't know. Don't have an answer.
I can talk to you about
There
that
you
off
go.
camera.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. You know, and then of course, just because a bill gets passed and even signed into law by the governor, doesn't mean it gets implemented. And one of these, you know, that bill that allowed PCAs to get paid, and Bob Marshall was very heavily involved in this, is for PCAs to get paid for assisting individuals with disabilities who are hospitalized or temporarily cared for in a skilled nursing facility. Now we know that EOHHS chose not to implement it for whatever reason, but reality is if somebody's in a hospital, anybody, you're lucky to get the care that you're in for the disease or problem you're in there for now. Corporate health care has really limited the availability of health care. So for a person with a disability, that gets extremely challenging because they've still got those same needs for the PCAs. Plus, if the PCAs aren't being paid, they're going to go off and do something else because they're not paid that well either. Right. So, you know, how can we change that so that once it's passed the legislature, it's passed the governor's office, how is it that we can allow an agency to say, no, we don't think that's a good idea, and just stop it?
So I think we shouldn't.
Right.
That shouldn't be the case. There are times where, and there's something happened this year, where the General Assembly, we had the best of intentions of what needs to get done. It was going to be in conflict with something else. So I need to, this is going to require a little bit more investigation and analysis, understand and appreciate. I always say to folks, don't tell me about the who, what, when, where, and how. Right. Let's focus on the why it didn't happen. Right. We understand and appreciate the impact, but this requires a little bit more analysis and investigation with regards to why it could not be implemented by EOHHS.
Right.
The executive office of, we say these terms like everybody knows what we're talking about.
Okay, yeah,
But the
right.
executive office
Right.
of Health and Human
Health and Human
Services,
Services.
EOHHS,
Right.
and particularly the Medicaid office,
Right.
why that's the case.
Okay. Now, it is not in conflict with Medicare and Medicaid on the federal level.
Right.
We know that they allow it, so that's.
There's something, there's something else.
Right,
And I don't have the answer for you. I wish I did.
right.
I think I have all the answers. I don't have many answers for many things, but it's the
Just
case.
counting on you to
I
have
know.
all the answers.
I know you will.
What can I tell
I
you?
let you down today.
There you go. Oh,
So that's we really need to be looking. I need to get the details about what is the conflict, what is the why, and how do we, okay,
how do we address it? Let's
how do we
get it.
bridge the gap,
Right.
or move the obstacles out of the way?
Right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then one other thing, let's try one more question.
Sure.
One problem that people with disabilities have that are on Medicaid, and we face it on an ongoing basis, the Rhode Island has a requirement. If you have durable medical equipment like this, or lifts in the house and things like that, that Medicaid has paid for, they've helped buy.
Right.
But when it comes time to repair them, they delay the repair by requiring a prior authorization. You would think that they would want to protect their own investment,
Right.
but it extends the already long wait times that we have for repairs, and it jeopardizes our independence
Correct.
and our health. It also creates a barrier. Some vendors will not do business in Rhode Island because of it, which may, be a concern if you're not able to. Well, for one thing, that I know one vendor that I'm always begging them to do this in Rhode Island, because there is none that will do
Right.
send that equipment. So how do we address that? Can we do it? Is there a reason we need that prior authorization when other states don't require it?
So I'm glad you brought it up. I have somebody checking on it now.
Okay.
I was not aware that was required.
Right,
There again, I'm always a firm believer as an engineer. To me, it's facts and data, and always
Right.
focus on the why. Why do we require the prior
Right.
authorization? And oh, by the way, if other states don't, what are we doing better than they are, or what are they doing better than we are, and figure out how to change it? Because you're right. At the end of the day, if Medicaid had supported it before, we need to maintain our investments, right?
right,
It's
right.
so.
Exactly, and that's, like I say, we depend on this equipment. It's not something that, we can say, well, okay, we can wait a few weeks. Our lives depend on it. So
People talk about necessary and nice to have. It's not nice
It's
to have.
not-
It's
yeah,
necessary.
It's yeah, absolutely, yeah,
Right. It's not even the case of necessary and sufficient. It's necessary and sufficient. It
Right.
checks both of those boxes.
right,
It's not a nice to have.
no.
So we need to
No.
understand and appreciate, there again, why is that the case? So I have somebody looking at that.
I appreciate that very much. So, and I thank you for joining me today.
It was good to be here.
Okay, it would be good to have you back sometime to talk some more about these things. Can we keep in touch over it?
As I say, when Annette calls, you answer.
All right, well, thank
call
you
anytime.
so much, that's impressive. I didn't know I had that power.
Anytime.
So, I thank you so much, Senator
Welcome.
DiPalma, for joining me today. People with disabilities need to have our voices heard, and I thank you for listening to that and helping make that happen. And thank you for listening. I'm Annette Bourbonnier from Nothing Without Us, Stories and Discussions of Meaningful Inclusion. Please hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. That and your comments will help us grow. Tell us who you want to hear from and what issues you want to hear discussed. I will be happy to forward any questions from today
Sure,
that
absolutely.
you may have for Senator DiPalma right to him. And please make sure you check out the earlier interviews with our congressman, a recent interview with Representative Spears, and other candidates that we've posted as part of this sub-series. Tell your friends about us so we can grow. You can find us on patreon.com and on YouTube, and you can follow me on LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Remember, our democracy depends on everyone getting out and voting. November 5th this year, You can't complain about the results unless you do. Until the next Nothing Without Us, I'm Annette Bourbonniere.